players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most revered in history of Magic the Gathering. Dreadhorde Arcanist, Expressive Iteration, Flow State, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind Bosch and Roll on YouTube, Thrabian University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Moxfield, Berserk Studios, and financial advisor and certified financial planner, Nicholas Robb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 174 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Flow State, the next expressive iteration. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter-exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U.
I am Brian Coval, aka Bosch and Roll.
And I am Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm.
Shout out to our new paid members. This time around, we've got Shepherd the Mailman and Let It Rip. Great name. Let It Rip. They, among all of our other paid members, will enjoy the pre-show, which includes a lot of fun anecdotes about how to live with another human being who may or may not occasionally drive you nuts.
Life happens. You can't predict the unexpected, but you can prepare. Edward Jones, financial advisor and certified financial planner Nick Ropp can help you with your financial goals, planning with life's ups and downs in mind. Call 314-377-9524, email nicholas.ropp@edwardjones.com. That's nicholas.raupp@edwardjones.com, or visit www.edwardjones.com/nicholas-ropp to get started. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
This podcast is sponsored by Berserk Studios, an indie gaming company based in Quebec, Canada. If you're intrigued by the idea of a chaotic co-op musical bullet hell, check out Just Shapes and Beats for a new spin on the shoot 'em up genre. If a Castlevania-style adventure to defeat a source of corruption is more your jam, check out Infernax. Both are available on Steam, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox.
And if you, listener, are interested in advertising to 10,000 plus Eternal gamers every episode, reach out. We are always accepting new sponsors.
Such as legacy streamer Harain, who is also sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out Harain's History of Doomsday video that is going to be releasing shortly. It should be live by the time this pod comes out. This documentary-style exploration of an iconic Eternal combo deck goes through the history of the deck, interviewing pilots from various eras, innovations, and new printings up to the present day. The intention is for this to be part of a series documenting the history of many legacy decks. Go check out episode 1 live on YouTube now.
I have to say, guys, I did watch it. I had a sneak peek, and it was super enjoyable. I went in going like, I don't really care that much about Doomsday. And then I got in, and it was just a lot of fun. Plus, I got to see some of my combo homies talk, Brandon Adams, Max Carini, and just like their insights on another Dark Ritual deck. So I enjoyed it. You will too. Go watch it.
I'll definitely be watching it once it's live.
So we're going to be talking about a new card that we'll be releasing shortly today. We're going to be talking about Flow State, but we're going to kind of set the stage here, as this is sort of a history is doomed to repeat itself sort of situation, where this card might be broken and looks a lot like some things that we've already seen get banned in Legacy. So join us for a couple of laps around the Legacy ban list real quick.
Let's start in 2014. A set comes out. It's called Khans of Tarkir. It introduces the Delve mechanic, featuring two bangers, Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. Treasure Cruise is just Ancestral freaking Recall in these cantrip Super Xerox decks of the day. Bob Wong immediately wins the first SCG Open with Khans Legal with Is a Delver featuring Treasure Cruise. And this sets the stage of what's now been over a decade of cheap card draw breaking the tempo shell on Legacy.
I think I was there at this Open when this happened, and like the room was electric as we started figuring out exactly how good Treasure Cruise was. And spoilers, as we transition into November, Izzet decks are the talk of the town. They are incredibly good going into GP New Jersey, which was incredibly hyped up by Star City Games. It was the largest GP to date as of that time. The event hall was gargantuan, and going into that event, I know that I was running multiple copies of Absolute Law in my Death and Taxes sideboard. Like, all creatures get protection from red. That's how much Izzet removal I was expecting. And spoilers, Treasure Cruise takes down the event easily in the hands of BBD, featuring a Jeskai Stoneblade deck that was incredibly well positioned versus the Delver deck, but also had its playset of Treasure Cruise.
And then Treasure Cruise gets banned, predictably, but much like we've seen in other situations where, Psychic Frog gets banned and Tamiyo occupies the space, Treasure Cruise gets banned, Dig Through Time's still legal. And here we go. We're just back in it again. The Blue-Red Delver decks, they did use Dig Through Time, but Dig Through Time really broke Omnishow. That was the one that just jumped out in front of everyone as the best Dig Through Time deck. It's insane at setting up the combo. It's insane at getting a second round of combo. It's insane with the Omniscience once you are comboing. Just everything that it wanted there. And Dig Through Time eventually got banned in September of 2015. And the passage from that article reads, quote, "Over the past several months, the strategic diversity of Legacy has been diminished. Blue decks using Dig Through Time and various combo decks have occupied a greater portion of the metagame, pushing a lot of other decks out of the competitive scene. The problem is that other strategies tend to lose to the blue decks too frequently. They used to be more competitive, but now they fall behind when the blue decks reload for 2 mana using Dig Through Time. Dig Through Time is banned." Blue decks reloading for 2 mana, gonna be a theme of this setup conversation and this entire episode.
So just going through those dates one more time so we can keep this timeline straight. Dig Through Time is printed September 2014, wins a GP November 2014, gets banned January 2015. Treasure Cruise is allowed to live in Legacy for a few months, where it dominates the format and eventually gets banned in September 2015. So this was less than a year for both Treasure Cruise, and Dig Through Time to exit the format. Like, that is how clear it was that the blue decks reloading for 2 mana was a bad thing to be legal in Legacy.
I have a few thoughts here, guys. So going back to the top, September 2014, Khans of Tarkir, yeah, it had delve spells in it, but also it had fetch lands in it. Imagine Wizards today printing a set with fetch lands and delve cards in the same set. I don't think they would do the same thing twice. I think that's just like a mistake from the get-go. And then I happen to remember those very early Izzet Delver decks because one of the pioneers of those early decks was Doug McKay.
The legend, Doug. Man, I love Doug. I miss him. I hope he's doing well.
Yeah, he's great. Lives in New Jersey, I think, your home state. So, but he was very adamant about maxing out on burn spells. Like, his early list even played 2 Fire Blast. And I remember a lot of these as a Delver decks being hyper aggressive. And the printing of Treasure Cruise really changed that. While they were still incredibly aggressive, it was the first time that they cared about card advantage. And I think Bob Huang's win really reshaped how people viewed that deck, because it wasn't just a 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Chain Lightning deck anymore. It was a deck that could go long if it needed to.
Right. Yeah. And that's where the deal breaks, basically. It's, you get to go fast. You get to daze me. You get to wasteland me. But if I get out of it, you're in trouble, because your cards aren't as good as mine anymore. And you're probably just about out of them. But not if they could draw cards repeatedly for cheap mana while dazing and wastelanding you. And that's where kind of the deal breaks. And honestly, looking at this timeline when we put these show notes together, I was surprised that September 2014 is when this started, because it feels like we've been whacking this mole for my entire life, where if it's not Treasure Cruise or Dig Through Time, it's Dreadhorde Arcanist, it's Wrenn and Six, it's Oko, it's Psychic Frog, it's Tamiyo, it's Expressive Iteration. This feels like an ongoing thing. But looking at the Legacy ban list, the old school cards, the ones that have been there all along, it's really only Gush that would do this. It's not like there's 10 other Expressive Iterations banned, or Ragavans or Psychic Frogs. Like, those are new cards to get that sort of effect at that low mana. In the old days, they just didn't do that. So the the old banned cards are like tutors and fast mana, and the new banned cards are cheap sources of card advantage. And I thought that was really interesting because Canadian Threshold, which was the Nimble Mongoose Werebear deck that then evolved to get Tarmogoyf, and then in 2011 it got Delver of Secrets, and this is core to Legacy. It had existed for all of Legacy up to 2014 before this pattern that we're now so comfortable with really emerged.
And to be fair, there is a gap for a little while. Once we pass 2015, it's kind of until like 2019 when we start getting to like the Fire Design War of the Spark stuff that we start to see this pattern coming up again and again and again and again and again.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's really important to highlight. And I know we've said these dates already, but I think Legacy became a format in 2006. Is that when it went from 1.5 to Legacy, or 2007?
2004.
2004. Okay. All right. So a little before that. So 2004 to 2014, Gush was the only card that needed to be banned for doing this sort of thing. From 2014 to 2015, that was just cruise and dig. That was a single mechanic that went through, and it took a while to sweep up both of them. And then we get 5 years from 2015 to 2019 before the next thing starts to fall apart. And 2019, like Phil called out, that is when design philosophy changed at Wizards of the Coast. This was, we're going to stop putting bad cards in packs. Every card's got to be for someone. Every card's got to do something. Every card should be exciting to play with. Draft decks went from needing to find your 23rd playable to needing to cut down from 27 because every card was just better than they were before. Merfolk Looter, a previous limited all-star because cards were just so bad. Now you don't even look at looters in limited because your cards are already better than what you would be spending the time and effort to loot them away on. This is a design philosophy shift that happens right before, the COVID era. And that's where we're going to go next.
I will say, I think there's like a little bit of an asterisk between 2015 and 2019. I know a lot of people think Gitaxian Probe was from Storm decks, and I think for the most part it was, but it was also incredibly good in those Grixis Delver shells with Deathrite Shaman. So I think Gitaxian Probe breaks the rules a little bit. It wasn't card advantage, but it definitely pushed the tempo decks over the edge, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We've got other bans in this time, just not necessarily for the card advantage reasons.
Right. That's a different thing we're talking about. And yeah, Gitaxian Probe, Mental Misstep was in the same set as Gitaxian Probe. That one didn't last very long. There's other bans for other problems, but specifically this problem, that was something different.
Oh, New Phyrexia. What a great fucking set.
Yeah, I recorded with Batterskull this week. New Phyrexia is still on the map. All right, let's take a little break and then we'll continue this history lesson.
All right, welcome back. So that was kind of lap one of the card advantage, this 2014-2015 stretch. And then we're gonna do it again, this time over the course of about 3 years though. So it's May 2019, Fire Design is here, and War of the Spark releases. So this is when we start getting a lot of like powerful new planeswalkers, your Karn the Great Creator type stuff, just absolute bangers all over the place. And War of the Spark releases, injecting a ton of things into Legacy, perhaps most notably Dreadhorde Arcanist. So something to keep in mind here is that 2019-2020 is the start of the whole COVID lockdown pandemic stuff. We don't get a lot of paper magic for the next couple of years. So reaction time to some of these things might have been slower than if the SCG circuit and GPs were in full swing. That's just something to keep in mind during this section.
Right. And the gap of May 2019, when War of the Spark comes out, to February 2021, where Dreadhorde Arcanist is banned, also includes Underworld Breach and Luris. Uro, which did not get banned but did shake up Legacy for a long time. War of the Spark also contained Teferi, Narset, and Karn, all cards that I have heard calls to be banned, at least at the time, for how messed up they were. Dreadhorde Arcanist was kind of a sleeper, And then it slept its way right into the slow to react COVID lockdown era. This card, I think, was legal much longer than it should have been. And we were all screaming for it by the time it actually happened. Like a year and a half of this card being legal is actually insane to me, seeing that written down. It feels like that one should have come and gone quick like Psychic Frog.
I believe that there's a card that we're overlooking a little bit here, which actually follows the theme of this episode, which is Wrenn 6. When Dreadhorde Arcanist released, the Delver decks were all about Wrenn 6. They were about accruing card advantage using Wasteland, but also your fetch lands with Brainstorm and doing that sort of thing. I actually think Wrenn 6 falls into the category of the expressive iteration style card advantage that we're talking about today. And when the deck was constructed, there wasn't really room for Dreadhorde Arcanist when you were doing the Wrenn 6 stuff. I remember our good friend of the podcast, Jarvis Yu, top-aided Grand Prix Atlanta with Rug Delver, and I don't think Jarvis played Dreadhorde Arcanist. He played two of the snake creature, the 2/1 that you could give hexproof.
Hex Drinker.
Yeah, that one. There just wasn't room for Dreadhorde, so Dreadhorde never really became much of a thing until Wrenn 6 was banned.
Right, and there was another card that ended up getting banned in the same announcement as Dreadhorde Arcanist that was also cooking along this time, and that was Oko Thief of Crowns, which the Delver decks were also playing. And I think the first time I remember playing against Dreadhorde Arcanist was in the, right after the COVID lockdown lifted and we could start traveling again. I played in a Team Eternal event. It was a Star City Games event. I think it was in Richmond, or it might have been in Roanoke even. And I teamed with Cyrus Cormangill and Will McGran as our Vintage Legacy old school seats. And we lost in the top 4 to a team featuring Harlan Fear and just 2 of his random buddies. And Harlan was on Blue-Red Delver with Dreadhorde Arcanist. And just seeing that card in play for the first time, it was like, oh my God, where did this come from? What's going on here? This feels tough. And that's when I remember it just starting to show up everywhere. Because I believe his team won that tournament, that deck list was printed, and people kind of figured out, oh, this is what we should be doing.
I looked back through a ton of our podcast episodes in preparation for this episode, and the utter despair that is just present in like the title names in this like legacy period that we're going to be talking about now is wild. There are titles like, come on, Wizards, just like begging for format management.
For sure. Okay, so February 2021, Dreadhorde Arcanist and Oko are banned. We have a brief reprieve for about 3 months because the next set to come out is Strixhaven, School of Mages, which gives us expressive iteration. But that's quickly overshadowed in June of 2021 by Modern Horizons 2, which gives us Dragon's Rage Channeler and Ragavan, among obviously all the other cards that are in Modern Horizons 2.
Murktide Regent.
That was a stream of busted shit.
Yeah, Murktide Regent, Urza Saga. I mean, there's cards in that set. Let's just say it's fair to say that's the elemental cycle, right? MH2. That's Fury, Grief, Endurance. Yeah. Okay. So pretty big drop. It would make sense that maybe the uncommon from the standard legal set doesn't get noticed right away, or is just pushed out by things like Ragavan.
So let's go ahead a little bit. So Modern Horizons 2 releases over the summer in 2021. And as we roll around to the next calendar year, in January of 2022, Ragavan is banned. Just similar logic as Dreadhorde Arcanist, playing it early snowballs the game. It kind of did everything. It was card advantage. It was mana fixing. Just incredible card. And now that some of the most broken stuff has exited the current Blue-Red Delver shell, expressive iteration starts to shine so much more. And I pulled a quote from the middle of this year, July of 2022, from an article by Mason Clark. Quote, "Expressive iteration is in every top deck in every format it's legal in. If you go and check the data, Standard, Modern, and Legacy are all run by the best card draw spell printed since Treasure Cruise." End quote.
Yeah. EI banned in Pioneer, banned in Legacy. It is still, it kind of got pushed out of Modern by Psychic Frog getting onto its corner and Felia getting onto its corner. Like, it took Modern Horizons 3 to really knock expressive iteration out of the top tier, because Is It Murktide was the go-to deck of that vibe. in Modern, but that's been replaced by Demir and Esper based strategies. So this card did run amok in all formats for a long time.
And I want to emphasize the long time here. So this is July of 2022. It is clear that EI is one of the best things to be doing spread across many formats. And in doing my trip down memory lane, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole and I went to look at some of the Delver decks of this period. Here's some YouTube video titles from this time. Legacy's Best Deck by Thraben. The Hands Down Best Deck by Bosch and Roll. New Default Best Deck by Bosch and Roll. And this was not creator hyperbole. This was just it is so clearly apparent during this time what the best deck is. Everybody knows it. Everyone is playing it. This is public enemy number one.
And I did look back at some of those lists from these videos whose titles you just named. And there were 2 main deck Pyroblasts in those lists at the time, because winning the EI war was the beginning and end of the Delver Mirror. Obviously Murktide is a top end threat as well, but that first EI finding the second EI just starts a chain that the person who's looking at a Daze in their hand and not enough mana to counter that first EI, it's over for them. And you really needed those things like Pyroblast to cleanly stop that from happening.
So I watched the intro and conclusion of that specific video, and the Pyroblasts were terrible in that video. And you said something along the lines of, if I was bringing this to a GP, I would still probably run the Pyroblasts because winning the mirror matters so much, even though they were terrible today.
Right. And that's something, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's not really the topic, but when you see cards like Pyroblast show up in multiples in main decks, I think that is the sign of an unhealthy format. That's just, you could say it's a risk. It's pre-boarding. It's like having Nile Spellbombs in your main deck during the Reanimator meta. You can make those arguments, but I would also argue that that's unhealthy. If I need to play 3 Nile Spellbombs in my main deck, that deck that I was trying to fight needed to be banned. So having 2 Pyroblasts in your Delver main deck, just in case you queue into the mirror, which is also going to happen in 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 of your matchups just by the numbers, and more as you win more and you're going into the winner's metagame. And that is probably the right way to build that deck at the time.
So speaking of deck building, you didn't really need to deck build for Expressive Iteration. The card was just really good. And your deck building constraints for Expressive Iteration might be something like play 1 copy of Mystic Sanctuary so that you effectively have 1 more copy of Expressive Iteration than your opponents might have. And so that you can rebuy it when you actually do reach that slowed down mid to late game.
Yeah, this is something about Expressive Iteration that took a little while to reveal itself. And I saw it in the folks who are talking about flow state on social media right now who were not there for Expressive Iteration. People thinking that this has to be played on turn 2 or turn 3 to really do what it needs to do. And that is not the case. The EI decks, you could play 6 baubles, 4 Mishra 2ers as bauble, and try to EI on turn 2 and convert 2 cards every time. Or you could just wait 1 turn and now turn on every land in your deck as a live hit for card advantage. Or, as I was doing in that era, I replaced Standstill in my Standstill decks with EI because it saw just as many cards and I didn't have to make my opponent jump through hoops to turn it on. I was playing it in Jeskai decks and Hot Loam Bant, for those of you who remember the 2022 Bosch and Roll era. I was EIing into Uro and Jace and the Wandering Emperor. Games go long. You have mana. You could just play it on turn 7 and then cast a 4-drop. It's fine. It still works. It was just the best way to draw cards, full stop, in the format, in any deck.
I have 2 points I would like to make here. I did a YouTube short on flow state, and I received a number of comments from people being like, you can't flow state on turn 2 for value, unlike Expressive Iteration. This card's not good. And I was just like, did you play with Expressive Iteration? It was not a card you jammed on turn 2, or if you did, you were desperate. You were not looking to get 2 cards on average out of Expressive Iteration on turn 2. So I think the people thinking that way just aren't, they might have rose-colored glasses on, trying to remember that era.
Or they weren't in that era. I'm not trying to, particularly blast one dummy from Twitter. But when I posted the card and I was like, wow, watch out for this one, somebody was basically like, you need an instant and sorcery. This is not even good. Read the card, bro. And I was like, how am I going to get an instant and sorcery in my graveyard in the decks that are already balanced around Delirium and making Goyfs bigger? That's so crazy. Like, how will we figure this out? And this person continued to be dumb for a while, and I started ignoring them after my first response. But it was clear that this person just doesn't play Legacy or understand anything. And I will be perfectly happy to just flow state on turn 4. And we have some specific examples coming later, but let me just put this thought in your head. Thoughtseize you, force your turn 1 play, untap flow state, get 2 cards. It is not hard to get an instant and sorcery in the graveyard. But we'll go more into kind of the sequences you could get there later. I just wanted to hit it now. This is so trivial to turn on flow state.
I've noticed this week a lot of people playing Mystic Sanctuary again, which is really interesting to me. So playing online, you run into Dimir Tempo a lot, and I think we're getting into the mid-range wars territory that we've talked about in the past, where I've noticed a lot of Dimir Tempo builds, I think they're mid-range builds at this point, playing Stock Up and Mystic Sanctuary. And when Surveillance came out, they sort of replaced a lot of the Mystic Sanctuary slots and decks. Like, there's been decks that have continued to play Sanctuary, but it's way less common than it used to be. And now we're seeing more Mystic Sanctuaries in the last month or so with Stock Up. And I think Stock Up is just going to become flow state in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and like we have a whole section later where we talk about where the spots that'll show up. But yeah, that is happening right now. I know Eco Baronin is having success going back low again. Like, he's on Nether Goyfs and Mishra's Baubles to actually pressure people who are trying to mid-range war. And I just played a Team Trio's Eternal event this past weekend where my Legacy seat played a really big version of Dimir Tempo, like 3 main deck Barogoyf kind of big. And he went 2-4 on the weekend. Like, he was just getting clapped left and right. And he lost one matchup to a bunch of Nether Goyfs that he was too clunky to answer before they killed him. He lost some matches to combo where he couldn't pressure enough. And, that is kind of a healthy breathing metagame consideration. Do you want to be 3 or 4 Barogoyfs? Do you want 3 or 4 Nether Goyfs? Do you want Baleful Strix and Hymn to Truck in the middle? Who knows? But I think that we will find with a card like Flow State, that deck can get low with Nether Goyf and grind. And that's where it starts to get concerning.
Can we talk about a great day in Legacy history where White Plume Adventure was banned?
Good night, sweet prince.
Honestly, like, we're talking about this because it was the same day EI was banned. But honestly, White Plume Adventure had to go. But I had just ordered an FPB playset of Stasis, and I was planning to play Stasis Initiative. One of my finest designs, like one of my greatest claims to fame in Legacy history, is figuring out how busted specifically White Plume Adventurer was with Stasis. And White Plume Adventurer got banned before I could ever play that in paper. So I have a playset of FBB Stasises that have never seen play by me, and I'm pretty bummed about it. And I think about poor White Plume Adventure every time I flip through my binder and see them. But go on. Expressive Iteration. That's what we're talking about.
So let's talk numbers here. So in July of 2022, it was clear that Expressive Iteration was dominant across multiple formats. It takes until March of 2023 for action to be taken, and Expressive Iteration is banned with White Plume Adventurer. I'm going to go ahead and read a quote from the article here. While we acknowledge and agree that with the many Legacy players who enjoy the play patterns of Izzet Delver and similar archetypes, our data indicates a need to take the win rate and popularity of the deck down a notch to allow for more metagame diversity and innovation. Our choice is to ban Expressive Iteration, as the card quality and quantity it provides allow Izzet Delver to easily adapt to stay on top of any changes in the metagame. In addition to removing a generally strong card, our hope is that by removing Expressive Iteration, we reinforce Izzet Delver's historical strengths, parentheses, efficient one-for-one exchanges, and weaknesses, parentheses, lack of sources of card quantity, in a way that leaves the deck more vulnerable in the metagame, end quote. So even Wizards of the Coast, who perhaps is not always super dialed into what's going on in Legacy, knows that when Legacy decks get this cheap source of card advantage, Legacy breaks.
Also, just look at how detailed that description was in a ban and restricted announcement. Wasn't that refreshing? I wonder if we could get that kind of quality in the year 2026 with our BNR updates.
I think we need improved quality and quantity. Maybe they can enter a flow state when they think about Legacy next time around.
Maybe we can have a ban list secret layer and that'll fix everything.
Okay, so the core of that ban announcement is something that it's a topic that we could spend a full episode on. It's something we've spoken on for hours and hours and hours over the 174 episodes of this podcast up to this point. And that's the died for Daze's sin argument. There are folks who think that every single one of the cards that we've listed here would be okay if Daze was banned. If we just had to, live in kind of a modern or pioneer level of interaction and let the cards fall as long as they're not backed up by free permission that only costs you one card. And I don't know that I want to rehash this that much. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think it is pretty clear at this point that Wizards of the Coast sees the Daze Wasteland Force of Will cantrip core as a format pillar. And I think they articulated very clearly in that ban announcement that Phil just read. The strengths are efficient 1-for-1 exchanges. The weaknesses are lack of card quantity in a way that leaves the deck vulnerable in the metagame. I think that's dope. I think even when a Delver deck is the best deck, going back and forth and your life total being reduced over a series of turns where you can interact with a creature, you could win over the top, whatever, rather than just dying on turn 0 or whatever stupid thing is being allowed as well. I think the best deck of the format being a deck that encourage exchanges and combat is good for Legacy. But, I know there are those who feel strongly that Daze is the core sin of Legacy and everything would be fine if it was banned. I just think those people are wrong.
Hear, hear. All right, let's take a quick break. This is about the halfway point of the episode. And now we're going to transition into talking about the future rather than the past.
Okay, let's enter our flow state. We've been talking about this card for the whole episode, kind of, but we haven't read it to you yet. And now it's time to do that. For 1 and a blue, 2 mana, this is a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. If there is an instant card and a sorcery card in your graveyard, instead put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
I love that last line because it says the rest instead of just like the remaining card. I don't know. I chuckled to myself about that.
Like, I wonder if that's just generic templating, or I wonder if that does leave the door open for, like, if you would look at cards, look at +1 cards as in effect in the future printing or something. Yeah, but I thought it was funny when I read it. Oh, put the rest, put all of them. Put that one card randomly on the bottom. Shuffle it good. You want to cut?
So you know what this isn't? Card draw. In our format...
Why is that relevant, Phil?
In our format, where Orcish Bowmasters is one of the most played creatures, our 2-mana source of card advantage that we're going to be injecting into Legacy specifically does not draw the cards, which is a really, really big deal. And there are other things other than Bowmasters that this is relevant for, such as, your Narsets, your Spirit of the Labyrinth, I guess if someone is crazy enough to register that.
Yeah, and this mattered, like we saw it with Stock Up as well. I mean, Brain Surge has existed for a couple years now, and other than, Phil Bleckman Miracle builds, doesn't really see play. It's only slightly different than Stock Up, and Stock Up is an instant multi-format staple where Brain Surge is fringe playable, and playable is in quotes. Putting cards in your hand versus drawing them does actually matter in this format, and that's one way that it is comparable to Expressive Iteration. We also have, these are the ways that it is the same. It's 2 mana, it's a sorcery, it looks at 3, and you can conditionally keep 2. The conditions are different, of course, and we'll go into that, but there are conditions on getting 2 cards out of EI, like you do need to be able to bottle and immediately deploy one of those cards. It's a different condition. Rather than a game state condition, it's a resource condition, but you conditionally get to keep a second card. it does not draw the cards, and it is blue. All of those things are the same.
It does have some different downsides. So you can cast this card without reaping maximum value, but you would like to turn this card on first by having an instant and sorcery in your graveyard before you do that. If you're playing something like Show and Tell, maybe you are fine just casting this on 2 mana to look at 3 and grab the best one. That's a deck that has played Impulse as a perfectly fine card in the 75 before. But you would prefer that this maybe not be a turn 2 play all of the time. Now, as Brian already alluded to, there's plenty of things that you can do to have this be online on turn 2.
Right. Here are some examples of ways you could cast this on turn 2. And I'm not even going nuts here. Like, you could do stuff like play a critical mass of sorceries with Thought Scour and Mental Note and just power your graveyard out. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about normal stuff that's actually going to happen. Turn 1 Ponder, force your first play. Now flow state, you untap, you're active on turn 2. In early Ponder plus Brainstorm or Thoughtseize plus Fatal Push, this is on from turn 3 forward. Turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler, Bauble, mill an instant or sorcery. Turn 2 Flow State, trigger DRC again. If you hit the other one, you're now hitting 2. Or turn 1 DRC with 2 or 3 Baubles. That might just be on turn 2. That's 4 Surveils before your card resolves. That's not even that hard. And Flow State itself is a sorcery. If you have the instant, sorcery is actually the significantly rarer card type in Legacy decks than instant is. And if we look at current counts, like Dimir Tempo has Ponders and Thoughtseizes, usually a total of 6 to 8 copies. And those are all of the sorceries in the deck. Izzet Delver has the 4 Ponders that are stock, and then people have the option to play like a Preordain or a Chain Lightning to up their sorcery count a little bit. But that's like 4 or 5 in the list. We have to think about the fact that if these lists bend to accommodate 3 or 4 Flow State, that's plus 3 or 4 sorceries. And you can just cast the first one to turn on the remaining 3.
So I know that it's not active on turn 2, but Surveil lands. But theoretically, you could force a turn 1 play, end step Surveil, hit the other type. I guess it would have to be sorcery in this example, turn 2 Flow State. Surveil lands are baked into every Legacy deck now, so any force on the first turn plus Surveil could do it. That's not unreasonable.
Yep, pretty common. And the deck building in deck building level 1 is you just shove 3 or 4 of these into the decks that clearly could benefit from it. And then the additional tuning from there that we'll see over the next few months is, do people start playing 3 Preordains or 2 Chain Lightnings? Or does the sorcery count go up that high? Or is it just fine as it is?
The thing that I like about this card so much is that you don't need to put bad cards into your deck to enable this. So for not one with nothing, what's the blue draw a card if you control a human and non-human thing?
Of One Mind.
Of One Mind. A lot of times there have been things that looked like they were going to be good, but they required you to jump through significant deck building hoops in order to get the payoff. And when you look back at the old Expressive iteration decks, there's just no bad cards in there. Your deck is full of things that look like Murktide Regent and Ponder and Wasteland and Brainstorm. There's no chaff there. And similarly, I don't think you have to put any embarrassing or bad cards into your deck to take advantage of Flow State. You just might ever so slightly skew the ratio of some of your cards from instant to sorcery.
Right. And so that's one of the big cons in the pros and cons versus Expressive iteration. We did a list of 5 ways where they're exactly the same. One of this big con is, how do we turn it on? And we just gave a list of ways where that's pretty trivial. One of the other cons is that Graveyard Hate interacts with this. The card types have to be present on resolution, not on cast, because they do sometimes template cards these days where it's like, as you cast this spell, the value is locked in. So like you don't get blown out by a removal spell or by a Graveyard Hate or something. This one is not built like that. So you can cast this into 2 DRCs, surveil twice, and hope it turns on. But you also can have it turned off by a Lion Sash or a Keen-Eyed Curator or a Nile Spellbomb.
So, everyone who is out there playing Rest in Peace is going to be eating good as these turn off the Dragon's Rage channelers and the Murktide Regions and the flow states at the same time. Oh, wait a second. It's embarrassing to play Rest in Peace in the world where Oops All Spells is one of the top decks in the metagame, and that card can just never come down fast enough to be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, that is true now. And in the blue-white Felia decks, I'm actually a big Rest in Peace enjoyer. Rest in Peace, Meddling Mage, like these are kind of my spots. I do like that a lot, especially the tempo Felia decks that have Daze and Stifle in them as well. You can get the game to that spot. But keeping in mind the effect on play and deck building that having access to something like Flow State can create, this could be a situation where you have 7 forces across your 75 and then some Rest in Pieces. And you're much more likely to make it to turn 2 because you're not afraid to 2-for-1 yourself aggressively on turns 0 and 1 because you'll get those cards back. Not that Rest in Peace interacts well with the flow states in your deck. A card like Quantum Riddler, if you're trying to bridge the gap and do it all. But that's my pitch for Rest in Peace in the metagame. And it does a card like Rest in Peace or Dothy Voidwalker. That one's much less embarrassing. Nile Spellbomb even. These cards, the ones that go one way and turn off your opponent's graveyard. If we're talking about Izzet Delver as the heir apparent, the place to just slot this in immediately, even though I don't necessarily think that's true, but that is how a lot of people are talking. That deck has Dragon's Rage Channeler, Murktide Regent, sometimes Unholy Heat. It's going to have Flow State. There's a lot of places where turning off that deck's graveyard is going to hurt them. And adding another engine that also cares about the same things that their threats and engines already care about does not diversify what this deck wants to do. It just makes it way better at doing the thing it's already doing, which could cause some tension in deck building.
So let's talk about why it's better than an Expressive iteration. I'd like to talk about how it's only one color. So there's no splash requirement, which means that it doesn't have to be Izzet. Like Brian mentioned, a lot of people are talking about it in Izzet Delver. Dimir Tempo is currently the best deck in Legacy. There's no reason that this couldn't be a flow state deck. And unlike Expressive iteration, that second color, it could be colorless. You can use your Wasteland to cast it, which is very different than Expressive iteration, because you don't have to play it off of 2 Underground Seas. Like, Wasteland becomes a real mana source in order to play this, which was a struggle with Expressive iteration. I think that's actually a really huge benefit of Flow State over Expressive iteration in this archetype.
Taking it a step further even, you could play this in a mono blue tempo deck, right? There's a very budget, what's the Prowess Otter enchantment?
Storm Chaser's Talent.
Yeah, there's a very budget Storm Chaser's Talent mono blue aggro list that I've played on the channel a couple of times. That is a lot of fun. You could very easily slot something like this into that deck to have another source of late game card advantage. You can throw it in Dimir, you can throw it in Izzet, you can throw it in every flavor of Grixis or other mid-rangey control nonsense.
Yep, and it's hard to get somebody off of this mana. Like Basic Island, that in play means that this card is live. It could come off the top from any land out of their hand at any point. That makes it hard to turn it off with something like Blood Moon, where, and I don't normally have Basic Forest in my Up the Beanstalk decks, but I do have Basic Island. And getting this online, imagining a situation where my opponent goes turn 1 Chalice of the Void, turn 2 Blood Moon. If I get 1 fetch land in between, I can chuck an instant and sorcery into the Chalice, and then it's on, and then my flow states start flowing, and I'll find that, Force of Vigor or whatever to get me out. I'm very excited about how easy this thing is to cast.
Yeah, and that's probably something we should highlight. If you weren't around for this, the EI, putting an EI into your hand and then doing something like lightning bolting or swords to plowsharing a creature that was on the board, and then you repeat this process every turn for the rest of the game as you like Mystic Sanctuary copies back when you don't actually hit another EI or a cantrip to find a new EI. It is an obnoxious play pattern.
It is, for sure.
So you talked about Expressive iteration, finding that second spell to kill a creature or whatever. And I think that's actually a downside in comparison to Flow State. With Flow State, you don't have to cash in that second card right away. You can put it in the bank. So if you don't want to waste that Lightning Bolt on a Noble Hierarch or whatever your opponent is doing that seems a little dirtily, you just save it for the next best thing. You don't need to spew value just because you're going to lose it. you get to use your spells how you want. And I think that's actually really important. It reminds me of back in the post-Top Miracle era, Lawrence Harmon innovated a list featuring accumulated knowledge instead of predict. And he talked a lot about how predict forced you into undesirable cantrip patterns. And the upside of accumulated knowledge is that you didn't have to use your ponders and brainstorms to set up your cantrips because your cantrips just worked naturally. And the same logic applies here to expressive iteration and flow state, where flow state just plays how you want to play. You don't have to take undesirable patterns like you would with the expressive iteration. Hopefully that makes sense.
Right. Like if you're playing, let's say I'm playing against Delver and they don't have a creature in play, and I expressive iteration and I see 2 Swords to Plowshares in a land. I have to take the land because the plow is just going to burn off if I bottle it, where flow state just puts those 2 plows in my hand and they're there for whenever my opponent decides it's time to play a creature. It was pretty common to just take the land because it was the guaranteed card, even though you didn't really need more lands in that spot if the card you flipped wasn't that useful. The thing I'm really excited about is you can tap out for flow state. Tapping out for expressive iteration without a land drop available or a deck built specifically to leverage it with a bunch of zeros was usually committing to losing a card, or you have to pass the turn to cast the EI, then you lose tempo. So imagining, like, I untap on my 4th turn of the game, I have 3 lands. I brainstorm, I ponder, the ponder finds land number 4, I cast flow state, which is on because I've just brainstormed and pondered, and I put 2 cards straight in my hand. I've used all my mana, my hand is now insanely sculpted, go. If that was expressive iteration, and I brainstorm, shuffle, ponder, find EI, I'm passing with 2 mana up because I can't use the full value there, and I lose the tempo in order to gain the card, and then even on the next turn, I do have to bottle one of those cards and use it right away. This is so much better than that. And I don't think this is groundbreaking theory. I just think that it's going to surprise people how messed up this is when they actually get to play with it.
All right, so where are we expecting to see flow state? I know that I am expecting to see it all over moxfield.com. Seriously, this deck is, or rather this card is going to be in most of the decks that I play on the channel immediately after release. This is just so clearly going to be a strong thing in Legacy that people need to be testing. I am going to be all over this card, even as a mage who doesn't necessarily like to play blue spells. Like, it is time. You're going to see cool deck lists on Moxfield with this.
Right. As we've talked about, what kind of decks want flow state? How about blue decks that have instants and sorceries in them? That's kind of that's the basement bar. And it's not a high bar to clear. And I don't think the Epic Storm's going to pick that up, but even though they are a blue deck with instants and sorceries. But short of someone who is trying to conduct a specific engine in a specific way, this card is going to be at least tried in basically any deck that can turn it on and cast it.
There will have to be deck building changes, assuming that you want to shove this in your deck as a 4 of. 4 things need to leave your deck, and you potentially need to change some things to sorceries to further support it. So if you're just trying to shove these into Is It Delver, what is leaving? How many 2-drops are you comfortable having in your deck? You know, how many Corey Steelcutters are you going to cut for this, for example?
Right, because Corey Steelcutter is also a 2-drop that generates card advantage, but the card advantage it generates is always a 1/1 with prowess, and that's not always the card that you want. So that's going to be an interesting thing to figure out. Corey Steelcutter also wants you to have a deck full of cheap spells, and flow state costs 2. It might be hard to trigger Corey Steels that you have if your card advantage package now costs 2 instead of 1. That's going to be something they have to figure out. But I think that is the obvious place to put it, and it's the place that, if it wants any, is probably going to want 4.
I also think that Corey Steelcutter rewards baubles in particular, which don't play super nice with flow state, because flow state doesn't care if you have an artifact in the graveyard. Obviously, baubles work really well with Dragon's Rage Channeler and Surveilling, but are you going to want to stuff your deck full of baubles and flow state? Like, that sort of Nambo synergy might end up costing you. So there will be some tough deck building decisions in that regard.
Likewise, Storm Chaser's talent doesn't care about instant and sorceries in the same way that Delver of Secrets does. If we are upping our instant and sorcery count, Delver flips more often, and we don't have to play as many baubles, but a bauble triggers your prowess otter the same as a ponder does. So like we might see the bauble number move around and just see a slower but much more resilient build of Izzet tempo that plays both. Izzet story or Corey Steelcutter and Flow State.
And if you're slowing down, should you just be on Dimir tempo? Like, that's another question. Like, if you're going to play the slower, more controlling deck, is black the better splash? Like having Thoughtseize and larger creatures and that sort of thing.
I'm still wrapping my head around what exactly it's supposed to look like in Dimir, because they have very good mana sinks already in the form of things like Tameo Cracking Clues and Barogoyfs and Kaitos and Stock Ups. And I have no idea exactly what the ratio of these cards is supposed to look like without getting my hands on the cards.
Yeah, I think, and I've been clear on this for 2 years now on this podcast. I think Thoughtseize is the best sorcery in Legacy. I think it's a sorcery that defines the rules of interaction in Legacy. And we were talking earlier in the episode about getting your sorcery count up. Thoughtseize seems like the place to be if you're trying to get a sorcery in your graveyard early. And Dimir Tempo is also obviously a ponder deck. And those are the 2 1-mana sorceries we're going to see all over Legacy. This seems like a good home for it. It does hit better than Tameo in some ways, because there are those games where you top deck Tameo on turn 4, and it's like, now I have a 0/3, I have no treasures, I'm out of cantrips, I'm just going to die. Flow State is much better in that spot. But also, there's no Protect the Queen strategy where I cast Flow State and then 4 turns from now, I just win the game. Like that's, which Tameo does do. So that's going to be interesting to figure out, though I think there is a home for both in that shell.
Agreed. So you've already mentioned that like the Thalia Quantum Riddler decks can have another way to spend mana. Some of those decks that are currently playing Stock Up might be looking to this instead. And I think any big blue deck, your Pokemokey Bug, your James Casau, Grixis Controls, I think those decks will really, really like this card.
Right. And those are decks that are built on a brilliant balance of 1 and 2 of hot little tech pieces. But if those tech pieces show up in the wrong order or at the wrong time, you just have kind of a weird deck. So maybe like 2 of those to find, like, if there's like 2 Witherbloom commands in a Pokemokey Bug pile, or like 2 Cling to Dust in James Casau Grixis, maybe you go to 1 of those and that opens up a Flow State, which gives you 3 looks at the 1 copy you have while doing other things. That might be a place where this slots in smaller than 4 numbers, as not an entire plan, but as a tool.
Can't we just cut the Nimble Obstructionist and play more Flow State?
You shut the fuck up. You leave James Casau's Nimble Obstructionist alone. And that's something that can also evolve. Like, we're talking right now about if only these blue generic pile decks had access to Flow State and then had to play in the current metagame. But if the metagame becomes about Flow State, we might see those decks adopt 4 of their own to keep up with Delver's 4. And then they also have their Uros and Kolagod's commands and stuff at the top end.
And then I have my 4 Flow States and my 2 Stock Ups in addition, and my Mystic Sanctuary to buy them back. And then we get killed by the super aggro deck.
Yeah, I just kill you with Netherglyph.
I think that there's an interesting debate or balance in the Ancient Tomb style strategies, where people are going to want to play Flow State because it's the cool new thing. But I think if your deck contains Ancient Tomb, I'd rather be playing Stock Up. There's no hoops to jump through. You have an outlet for that 2 colorless mana from the Ancient Tomb. Stock Up digs deeper than Flow State. And I think in decks like Show and Tell, I'd much rather be on Stock Ups. That said, there might be a world out there where you're on both, and I would like to live in that world because that sounds glorious. And Stock Up, obviously, sorcery for the Flow State. But I think if you have to choose one or the other, I'm Team Stock Up.
Yeah, I could see these decks playing like 5 or 6 copies of this effect, and we might see just the 4 Stock Ups first and then a Flow State or 2 to supplement them. Or I might see like 3-2, where I'll get into my 3 stock-ups later, and my flow states will help me find them while being stronger against Dazes and Wastelands. And I don't know. That's interesting. And if we're talking about Omnishow, I mean, obviously starting to have a conversation about a game of Magic where Omniscience is in play is already kind of goofy, but just anticipate off of Omniscience, finding the next thing to keep it going. Like that's a perfectly reasonable thing to be doing. If my hand was like Show and Tell Omniscience flow state and with no graveyard, I'm ripping it off. My area of expertise, flow state does not trigger Up the Beanstalk. This is one of the card draw engines that I think is more powerful than this. However, Up the Beanstalk is not a huge player in the metagame right now because of how fast the tempo and combo decks are. And I don't think that Flow State is necessarily a card that's going to replace Up the Beanstalk, but I could see playing 1 or 2 of them as an additional 2-mana card advantage slot. Because not every card in your deck has to trigger Beanstalk, but if there is a spot where it just simply doesn't fit because we're already doing something more powerful, that might be it. Up the Beanstalk did not coincide in existence with Expressive Iteration.
I remember a day in which those Up the Beanstalk decks played Lorien Revealed as their additional card advantage slot to trigger Up the Beanstalk. Where's Lorien Revealed, Brian? Give me that back. That's what I want.
Orcish Bowmasters killed it.
Yeah, Lorien Revealed. I mean, Lorien Revealed was more like our 21st land and our 22nd blue card for force that once in a while we had the pleasure of drawing 4 cards when we cast. But yeah, I mean, the format's so slow. I mean, the true answer is that the format has gotten so fast now that you don't really have time to discard a card at the cost of 1 mana to find your next land drop to then play the game. Like, you just got to be moving faster than that. And that's kind of where Lorien Revealed went.
So Doomsday could potentially do this. Like, you want Brainstorm, you want Thoughtseize, you have Dark Ritual, you have Doomsday. It doesn't seem like you have to jump through very many hoops. You can potentially put Flow State in your Doomsday pile to get 2 of the cards out of your Doomsday pile at the same time, which sometimes you have to jump through weird Brainstorm, crack LED hoops to do. This is very, very intriguing to me. You cast your Flow State, you get your Cavern and your Thassa's Oracle off the same card. This is neat.
Yeah, I don't think this is a stretch or really even crazy, because when Doomsday resolves, it goes to your graveyard. The only card in your graveyard is a sorcery. And frequently, the first thing you want to do after you resolve Doomsday is draw a card to jumpstart your pile. And if that card is Brainstorm, now Flow State's on. I even saw Eureka tweeting back and forth with some Doomsday players about Manamorphose. Or Doomsday, Manamorphose, now you're on, and you have the 2 mana to cast Flow State. And you can get as weird as you want with this, but even just resolving Doomsday and then casting Brainstorm usually wins the game anyway. Like, that Doomsday pile is solved. But getting 2 cards, getting actual card advantage, I haven't seen an Ideas Unbound in Doomsday in years. That card probably is just past its prime. But, I mean, this one, you're happy to cast this card all day, every day before the Doomsday, and it can be a functional part of a pile. That's a lot.
That's where I was going to go, Brian. The Doomsday experts that I talked to have been talking about how there hasn't been a good 2 mana plus card thing to play because Ideas Unbound is so bad pre-Doomsday, and now Flow State breaks that rule. And Doomsday does put itself to the graveyard, but your deck often contains Edge of Autumn and Street Wraith, especially if you're not on the tempo builds, which means that you can cycle into Consider, mill Thassa's Oracle, and then you get like Petal Exhume, or not Exhume, what's it called? Unearth. That sort of thing just wins the game. You could build Lion's Eye Diamond piles as well. That's certainly possible. But just like cycle into Consider is also both card types you need for the Flow State. So there's a bunch of different things you could do here. That's going to be the first deck I record once Secrets of Strixhaven is legal. It's the top of my list. I want to see how good this card actually is in Doomsday.
For sure. And we are getting up against our normal runtime here, but we do want to shout out counterplay options real quick. This is not meant to be a doom and gloom episode. It's more like, we've seen this before. Here it comes again. I don't really expect it to be legal that long. But while it's here, What can we do against it? And the classic answer that's been the answer in the Legacy format for the past 2.5 years, win fast. This is a 2-mana spell that requires additional time to turn those 2 cards into game actions. So, kill them before they have 2 mana.
I played a league with Ruby Storm today. My Eldrazi opponent played Eldrazi Linebacker on turn 1, 2 games in a row, and I was literally dead on the 3rd combat step. I did not have time to set up at all. If you want to go swinging with, your Amped Raptors in your energy decks, just go with Oops All Spells and present a turn 1 win before this card is relevant at all. Many of your Ancient Tomb-based strategies, your Show and Tell decks, Initiative decks, Stompy decks, Forge combo decks. Like, you can do busted things with fast mana before the blue players get to settle in for their comfortable long game.
Also, just play Graveyard Hate. Like, Oops All Spells is the second best deck in Legacy right now. It's like 9% on MTG Goldfish, last time I looked at least. Graveyard Hate is good. Graveyard Hate is good against Flow State. So continue to play now Spell Bombs, Endurance, Cling to Dust even. There's a bunch of playable things. I know earlier in the episode, Brian mentioned Lion Sash and Curator. Those are cards I haven't thought about in over a year. But yeah, I mean, if you're playing a Green Sun Zenith deck, Curator makes a lot of sense. There's tools that we have access to.
Yep, and those particular tools like Curator and Lion Sash in these toolboxy Green Sun Zenith or Recruiter of the Guard decks dovetail into our next way to beat these decks, which is outgrind them. 2-mana draw 2 is very good, but if those cards can't get through your defenses, or you've drawn more cards, or you're doing something bigger, you could still beat that. Like Yorion Taxes can grind these folks into dust. Your Wastelands, your passive Graveyard Hate, your removal, if you just have so much removal that you're killing the 2 things they grab and you keep moving. Felia can outgrind this. A Quantum Redler getting blinked every turn will do more damage while drawing just as many cards as a Flow State. Beanstalk, if the games are going long, if the metagame slows to a place where we need to be doing something bigger. I shouted out Beanstalk earlier in the episode as maybe drawing more cards than Flow State over the course of a game. Lands, that's a deck that can clap with a 20/20 real quick. It can put the opponent in a Wasteland lock. You have main deck Bajuka Bog. You have an Urza Saga package. You could put a Soul Guide Lantern or something like that in. They got tools there. The Big Tron, the Cloud Post decks. If you're casting Emrakul, it does not matter how many flow states they've resolved. And, of course, your own flow states. If people are on it and you're mad that they're on it, you could get on it too and meet them where they are.
You can also just try to find something that occupies a niche that is good against Flow State. So Painter is the example we have here. Painter has a combo finish that can kill you. If you are playing the Sewer Valence builds, you can die on turn 2 to that deck now relatively easily without something like Lion's Eye Diamond getting involved or anything. This deck also has main deck Pyroblasts that are going to naturally be good against Flow State and the cards that are in decks with Flow State. And this is a deck that often has tutorable Graveyard Hate off of Urza Saga.
Yeah, there was a long period of time on this podcast where it felt like every single week we were like, yeah, Painter's a sleeper right now. People should get on Painter. That's really well positioned. And that stopped being true when Graveyard combo decks took over the format for a while. And Painter's probably still not hyped to pair into Oops. And if we go into a slower, blue-centric, slow card advantage metagame, Painter's going to be phenomenal again.
They might need to add some more Pyroblast, though, because the current lists are down to 3, and if you're expecting to battle Flow States with them, you might want more than 3 copies.
Yep, that's fair. All right, gentlemen, we've talked for longer than we're supposed to. Expressive Iteration, I think it's back. It might even be better. There is one thing before we sign off that I want to mention, and that's that the metagame is very different now than it was. Like, we've gone through Modern Horizons 3, which includes the Oops Supremacy era. Tamiyo exists, which will compete with Flow State in at least Dimir Tempo, which is the top deck. Is there a possibility that things have just moved so far that Expressive Iteration and something like it is actually just fine? Is it possible that Flow State does nothing and EI is a safe unban? What do you think of that theory?
Personally, I think Flow State is better than Expressive Iteration, but we might not realize the ramifications of this until Tamiyo becomes on the ban list, because that's what really happened with Expressive Iteration. We said earlier in the episode. So I think it might be a sleeper initially.
I am a big fan of shut the fuck up and test the cards. Like, I am going to get in there, get my hands dirty, and try out a bunch of things, some of which are going to be really good and some of which are really bad. We have laid a lot of groundwork for theory today, but like, it is time to sleeve up cards and get in there and get dirty.
Amen, brother.